Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Safety and Risk Success podcast. I'm Christian Harris. Something a little bit different this week on the podcast, and this kind of ties in with an event I'm running on Wednesday this week, which is the first of what will be weekly safety roundtables. And I've invited Marcus Cauchi to join me today, and he's a sales expert. He's been working in the field of sales for 35 years. 17 or so of those years were with a franchise business model. And since then, the last couple of years, he's gone out on his own and he helps companies that are trying to grow to do so in a more predictable, sustainable and certain way. And the reason I invited Marcus onto the show was firstly because I'm going to be talking a bit about how to sell safety in this roundtable on Wednesday, but also because I think that selling and safety are in many ways synonymous, and it's important if you are a safety or a risk manager to understand how to sell, because actually you've got to engage with your board, you've got to engage with your colleagues, you've got to collaborate, and that's a big word that Marcus and I talk about with other parts of the organisation to get stuff done and to rally people behind the cause of feeling safer. So I'm sure you'll find this really interesting. It's a little bit out of left field, but I really do think that if you're a fan of the podcast, you're going to get a lot from this episode. So do listen in. If you enjoy it, let me know. I'd love to get your feedback. And if you want to join me on the Safety Roundtable, it's Wednesday, 9 a.m. and you can check out safetyroundtable.co.uk for more details. With that then, let's join the episode with myself and Marcus Cauchi. Cheers.
Welcome to the Safety and Risk Success podcast with Christian Harris. We believe that proactive safety and risk management powers business performance. Each week we explore this theme, sharing guests, stories, insights, trends, hints and tips. You can find us on all the major podcasting platforms, and video versions are available on YouTube. But for now, let's join the conversation with Christian.
Marcus, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Been looking forward to this. It's something a bit different, but I think actually something that's really relevant to the audience. I actually wrote an article a while back which was entitled "Here's Why the Sales Director Should Oversee Health and Safety in Your Business." You can imagine. You can imagine that put the cat among the pigeons.
Were there pitchforks and torches?
It wasn't too bad actually. I didn't backtrack on that point at all, but I did sort of obviously in the article clarify what I meant. I mean, without me explaining what I think about that, what would be your reaction to that hypothesis? Just reading the headline.
Well, in all honesty, I always use health and safety as a paragon of what sales should be doing instead. Because sales and marketing are the only department where a 97 to 99% failure rate is considered acceptable as an industry.
That's true.
If your health and safety people had that kind of failure rate, methinks they may end up in jail.
Yes, that's a very good point, actually. Yeah, that's a very good point. Yeah.
Where I'm coming from is that you need to think deeply in order to prevent the problems downstream. And again, this is another thing that I love about the whole thing around or the whole piece of managing risk, because it requires you to imagine and think forward and ask what if and lean deeply into problems. Now, when you do this and you do it with your customer, then it starts to become a really interesting proposition because you're working collaboratively together. Now, there's a model that myself and my co-author of our next book, Simon Bowen, are working on at the moment. So this is hot off the press. It's not even been published yet. But at the bottom, you have organizations and people who compete. They don't play nicely with others. They cover their homework. Everyone, it's us versus them. And they have this very warlike mentality. They talk in terms of campaign and crush the competition. Anyway, they become slightly more enlightened when they realize that no man or company is an island. And so they coexist, but they do so with reluctance. It's this, well, you know what they're like, but suppose we have to. And this is affiliates, it's other departments, it's your competitors on the board, all this kind of stuff. And then you get to the next level up, which is where you collaborate. Now, collaboration in principle, enormous fan. The problem is that most people collaborate at arm's length. And in doing so, what they also create are the conditions where the collaboration will only rise to the level of the least courageous partner. Yeah. Now, what that means is you've got some form of cooperation, but it's not real. It's not deep. It's not intimate. Now, there's this sort of chasm of chaos between the average, the mediocre middle, and what great looks like. Now, if you look back through human history, what is our superpower?
Oh, you'd think it would be communication.
It's tied to that. That's really important. But what does communication facilitate?
Working together.
That's it. Collaboration, real collaboration. That's what put us at the top of the food chain. Okay. But for some reason in business and in life and pretty much everywhere, we seem to want to beat our fellow man instead of work with them. So this is a difference in mindset between a growth mindset and a fixed mindset, an infinite game player and a finite game player. So for those of you who are not familiar, a finite game is something that has a beginning and an end. And the objective is to win or not to lose. Yeah. Now, in an environment where you're trying to collaborate and both sides are trying to win, but they have high self-orientation, how long do you think that collaboration is likely to last?
Not very long.
Right. So that's like being in a marriage and scoring points against each other. There's research that shows with a 93% certainty within 8 seconds of seeing a couple, you can work out whether they're going to be divorced within 3 years. I mean, it's that obvious. And so the same thing applies in all human relationships, because that's it. We're social primates. Yeah. That's what took us down from the trees into the savannah, and it helped us to build and develop. We were collaborating a lot longer before we had speech. We might have had communication, but now what's this all got to do with safety and risk? Well, in a world where it's us versus them, we also need to think back into our history. Because when you start to design your business and your organization and your approach to health and safety and risk and finance and sales around natural systems, and God knows I am no hippie, okay, just to be absolutely clear, this is nothing about tree hugging or anything like that. But we've got 3 billion years of natural evolution to look at. And why not just try and work out what works already?
Yeah.
It strikes me we seem to be so incessantly focused on trying to reinvent stuff that we don't need to. So what I'm seeing more and more of is businesses are changing, sales organizations are changing, especially now there is a generational change, because the boomers are they're in their last year or two, if they haven't already retired. And Gen Xers, the successful ones, are already retired. Old buggers like me are carrying on forever. And the ones who really made it big, they're already playing golf and wearing hush puppies. But the next, I think that the people my age who are still around are going to be massively and very quickly bypassed. Because my generation and the generation before mine had to make space for technology. And we did so reluctantly, I mean, kicking and screaming quite often. Yeah. And it's still arcane. It's a dark art. If it goes wrong, we do literally go into a primeval panic. And then we have to call our teenage children or someone on a help desk who's a third our age. Yeah. And we're grateful at the end of it because we're all desperately dependent on this stuff. Okay. So again, another driver of the amygdala and all the panic and cortisol and adrenaline that's going on. This is just real life. Now, millennials and Gen Z and subsequent generations, technology has just always been there. It's life. It's just part of life. Yeah. So 3 days ago, one of my salespeople sneezed over the phone, and she's in New York State. And I said, bless you. And I marveled that I would instantly know that 5,500 miles away, someone sneezed who I knew. Now, to me, that's still a bit of magic. I told my daughter, and she went, nah, and?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, therein lies a huge difference, because what we've seen over the last, probably about over the last 40 years, is a horrible, horrible misdirection in the way sales has been focused, marketing has been focused, finance has been focused, because of the explosion in venture capital and private equity and the inflation that's occurred in that space. 30 years ago, there were not many venture capital companies. Now there are about 8,000. And it's expensive to buy into that space. And they have investors who are looking for a fast return.
Yeah.
Now, this is where we need to have a systems thinking brain on, because now we've got to think about the law of unintended consequences. Because if I start out being a company that is obsessed with creating a great work environment where people love coming to work and give massive discretionary effort, highly engaged, then I end up with really happy customers. And then as a founder, I get that itch because I see everybody else getting these $100 million payouts and thinking, well, I want a piece of that. And I start thinking of that as a milestone in the business's evolution, instead of what it should be, which is fuel and nothing else. But investors, because they have the oxygen, have an enormous stranglehold. And the power shifts. And the emphasis moves to the exit and the notional, utterly irrelevant valuation that is literally as valuable as your cod and chip wrapper by 6 o'clock that evening. And so what do? They drive this behavior where everything is transactional. And so they try and at the end of the month or the quarter, when they're short, they say, we're behind, so we need you to bring some deals forward. And again, anyone in risk or health and safety must understand a parallel here, which is by bringing the deals forward, they start creating a mathematical cascade. At the moment, and this is based on 80 million cold calls a year, so it's a good statistical base. It takes 33 dials to 46 dials to get through to a decision maker if you're cold calling. And lots of people still cold call.
Yeah.
It takes 14 effective conversations to get one first meeting. So now you're into the 300 to 500 mark per first meeting. And only 1 in 8 first meeting on average convert into a second. So now you've got a tariff just to get to a 1 second meeting of around 2,500 to 5,000 calls. And they're taking entire deals from the next quarter, not just second meetings, but entire sales cycles, and trying to bring them forward. And then they discount to try and bribe them. Now, most of them don't buy because they're not ready. But some of them have been waiting for this. And now you're stuck at that level of 20% norm of rate card for 3 years. That's not good management of risk.
No.
So I have to dispute your point about whether or not they should be like sales directors.
Well, I was thinking about the fact that a good sales director is obsessed with inputs because they know that that's what they can control, and they can't control the outputs. Whereas in health and safety, often we are predisposed to focus on the outcomes, and we sometimes don't put as much effort on the inputs.
I 100% agree with you. The only thing you have control over is behavior, not the result. I don't control revenue. I don't control profit. I don't control sales cycle length, but I do control the behavior that gets us there.
Yeah.
However, if only that were the case in most cases, what you're describing is the ideal sales director.
Yes, of course.
And yes, they absolutely should be doing that. And that is critical. But it so rarely happens. I mean, there was a study done by Jonathan Farrington in 2020, and he's a big name in our world, or was a big name. And he said that only 6% of sales managers are fit for purpose.
Which doesn't surprise me.
Sorry?
It doesn't surprise me in many ways, because if you're good at selling, you end up getting promoted to sales manager, and you're probably not a manager. You're a good salesperson. It's not the same thing.
Well, exactly. Well, actually, the values should be the same, but the skill set is different. And in the UK, there are 2.4 million accidental managers across the board. Now, on average, managers have 7 to 8 reports. So you do the maths. It's about 16.8 to, I don't know, 21 million, something. My maths isn't very good. But that's half the UK working population. Is reporting to an accidental manager who hasn't been trained, had no runway, is doing what they think is best, gets little or no support, is in the most precarious position in the team and probably in the chain of command, gets little or no coaching and support, is under-resourced, has little or no budget and little or no authority. So they resort to supervising and rescuing. They do the work. Now, when they stop doing that and they start coaching in the moment on the job, what's really very interesting is there are 9 management competencies that the CBI says, if you move the needle only 7% in all of those areas, that's enough to take the UK out of the economic slump that the pandemic caused. Now, most people are not looking in the right place for their solution, because most of them would be looking at marketing or sales instead of the management layer. Because if I get my managers to coach on the job in the moment, then I empower my salespeople to think for themselves. I free up 2.5 months per manager to focus on building the bench, because their number one job is hire the best people. That's risk mitigation. Get the best out of them, train them, onboard them, coach them, hold them to account, challenge them, support them. That's number 2. Make sure they have the tools and resources they need to do their best work every day. Help clear the path and protect them from acts of idiocy from above. And then make sure that they have a voice. Because if I get 8 people doing the work, as opposed to me doing it, I'm first of all not a bottleneck. And they now get all created because they feed off each other and they synthesize.
You're massively leveraged as well.
And this is why things like diversity, they're not cheap. Diversity is a profit center. Health and safety is a profit center. Risk management is a profit center. Sustainability is a profit center if you actually apply it. But the problem is, and Mark Twain said it way better than me, your eyes won't see if your imagination is out of focus. Because so many people are fixated either on the short term or their noses to the grindstone, and they don't get to see the bigger picture. So you need to think of this. If you think of this like, and forgive the inappropriate metaphor at the moment, but if you think of it like a night bombing raid, And every center of dissatisfaction is like a bomb hitting the ground, and there's a little flash and a pop. Now, that could be sales being pissed off with operations, or finance griping to marketing about an overspend. Okay, now those are all those centers of friction and tension. Now, if I have a high enough view, then I can start to see these patterns. I can see the same things popping. I can see the interplay. And this is where most salespeople they lack patience, because they're transactional, because they're being driven by their compensation, how they're measured, and what their bosses are telling them. Yeah. Now, if you take a step back and you start getting a bit holistic on this, then you start to see the interplay. And what you realize is you're dealing with wicked problems. Now, wicked problems are defined by the first thing you try, not going to work, guaranteed. So basically, capture the lessons, break your nose a few times, rinse and repeat, and hopefully it won't be fatal. Secondly, stakeholders differ. They're going to be different people, different stages, different values, different emphasis, different backgrounds. The rules change as you go. And there are no perfect solutions, only imperfect outcomes. Now, when you accept that chaos, the border between accepting that chaos and the order that you want, that's where the friction is. And that's where you start to create cooperation, real cooperation. That's where you start to co-create solutions through the synthesis of different people. This is why diversity, real diversity, is so important. You need different generations. You need different ethnic backgrounds, different perspectives, different genders, different skill sets. Because the more eyes you have on a problem, the more elegant and simple and sustainable the solution. And this is why one of the most important things that any risk management company can do is focus, or any risk manager can do, is focus on learning coaching skills. Because if you can learn to coach internally, you'll start to create a groundswell. Because you'll equip them to work it out for themselves. The language will change subtly. Now, if you can change management behavior from command and control and directive to one of this operational coaching, and augmenting that with personalized moments of practice, what you end up with is a really well-honed personalized development plan that means that the individual grows, and that is meeting their full potential. And the manager's job is just simply to grease the wheels and find more of the same. Collaborate with other departments. So, thinking about it, why wouldn't health and safety and the risk management department work with customer success and sales and engineering and product development? 40% of help desk tickets in IT are created because engineers designed the product. They didn't talk to a customer. Look upstream and look at what did we do that was stupid before that's caused this today. Stop doing that.
Very interesting. Very interesting.
the first Cauchi law of risk management. Stop doing stupid things.
That would help, wouldn't it? That would help.
Don't be an arse.
That's a good rule. That's a good rule for life in general. One of the things that you talk a lot about, and I was really keen to delve into, was buyer safety. So could you kind of explain the concept of that? Kind of where did it come from, and how that's relevant?
Yeah, it came out of a conversation with a co-author of mine, and a huge influence on me. And what's really interesting about this is that if you're going to sell, you need to first of all understand what selling is and what it isn't. Selling is not trying to put your hand in someone else's pocket and rip them off, although you'd be forgiven for believing that that might be the case in some instances. You can't sell sustainably, repeatedly to the same people time and time again if they don't feel safe. So I fundamentally believe every buyer deserves to feel safe whenever they're engaging with, in any way, shape, or form, a salesperson. This requires rigorous authenticity on behalf of the salesperson. That means it is never okay to lie. It is never okay to exaggerate. It's never okay to hide something that's material to making the decision. Because for us as sellers, it's an opportunity, it's a transaction, it's a bit of commission perhaps. But for the poor people who've got to live with it, it could be their livelihood. It could be the difference between loving their job and hating it and leaving it. It could be the difference between their success and failure. And as a seller, you know that things are not going well because the communication is mainly only one way. Yeah. Now, if that is the case, what you need to really work out is if you're pushing that rope uphill, can you imagine the pushback that happens when the risk is fully transferred to the buyer and now they own it 100%? Because you're not getting that renewal.
No.
So when I'm working with my clients and with my sales teams, I'm telling them that their job is to prospect for customers who are going to be a customer in 5 and 10 years' time, not to hit your target this quarter. Because that sets a very different mindset. And I'm playing the long game. I've got to turn up, consistently be valuable, be relevant. That way I can earn intimacy, because without the intimacy, I can't have trust. But in order to have that, I have to have low self-orientation. And again, if we're thinking about risk and health and safety and all of those fun things, if we actually considered the people around us instead of being selfish and largely stupid in many cases, many of these things wouldn't happen. People wouldn't end up in A&E with unmentionable things in the wrong places. The problem is that so often we're driven to be selfish. But actually, we need good examples of where people collaborate, where people get caught doing good stuff and they're commended for it, instead of it always feeling punitive. Because certainly when I talk to people about risk, you can see them physically tense up. Yeah. Health and safety, there's a bunch of jokes about them. Yeah. HR, another one. HR should be a profit center. And instead it's become this poor substitute for legal advice while you start to abuse your employees. What a waste. Do you know that if you have highly engaged employees, first of all, health and safety goes through the roof. Yeah. But you get a 316% higher compound annual share price growth than companies that have only mildly engaged or actively disengaged staff. 373% higher profit per employee, 140% higher revenue per employee, 20% more higher daily productivity, and a 40% lower attrition rate. In this day and age, if you're not looking after your people, you're effectively opening the floodgates.
You're almost giving up on your business being successful.
Yeah, you are. You're just shooting yourself in the foot. That's like banging your head against the wall and complaining about the headache and blaming the wall for it.
Never a good idea.
No.
It sounds to me then that a lot of this is about, and it's interesting because I've had some similar conversations, more theoretical about health and safety, but it's about communication and trust building, and as you say, collaborating properly with people and getting to understand what they really need and want and desire and what drives them and what's going to make the difference to them, and empathizing. And
I put money on it. No one wants to come to work and get injured.
Absolutely right. Yeah.
Right. And no one wants to die at work.
No.
And none of the bosses want their people to die at work or get injured.
Yeah.
No one in the community, especially, wants people to get injured or die, apart from maybe undertakers.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
So we're all of common purpose. Why the hell don't we work together on this?
Mm.
Well, why don't we think about the kind of organization we want to create? Because if we think about the higher purpose of a business, now this is starting to get a bit esoteric, but it's absolutely on the money. When people with a purpose band together, it's very easy for them to weather the peaks and troughs.
Yep.
They have resilience, they have sustainability. They tend to operate in really high support, high challenge cultures. Now, I don't know about you, but as far as I'm concerned, that's my idea of work heaven.
Yeah.
Yeah. You got your back covered and you're growing, you're challenged, your mind is stretched and you're able to create. And the work that you do feels important and meaningful. Well, yep. Even the most mundane work can feel meaningful if there is purpose behind it. So again, what is the purpose of your business? Is there a way that you can make risk or health and safety or sales part of that? How do you contribute to that? Now, that's an exciting place to work. And in this day and age, again, in terms of managing risk, if you want to manage your workforce and you want to plan ahead, you better be damn sure that you've got purpose, because you will lose talent. I was at an event where I was speaking about a month ago. The former head of DE&I from Adidas was in front of 200 students talking about careers in Adidas. For an hour, they taught him a new one constantly about child labor, Chinese supply chain, lack of diversity in their workforce, and all sorts of other stuff. And he asked, how many of you would like to work in Adidas to further your career? 3 hands out of 200 went up. Okay, because for them, it didn't fit with their value system.
Yeah. Whereas 30 years ago, it would have been 197.
Yeah. 30 and a bit years ago, I would have put my hand up. Me, the athlete.
I'm no athlete either. I think it's something I've been talking a lot about, that whole values piece, and how it has to drive the change, that purpose-led change that you talked about, actually, because people are going to not be customers, not want to be staff if they're not aligned with your values going forward, and that's very different than it was even 10 years ago.
Even investors now, I mean, BlackRock, if you don't have a strong sustainability policy, they will not invest a single cent in you. Sustainability is not an option. And there's a reason for this. 40 years ago, Milton Friedman came up with the idea that every business exists to serve shareholder value. Now, whether he intended it to be interpreted quite as it has been or not, I don't know. I was upbraided once by one of his former students who said that wasn't what he wanted. But the way things have worked out is everything is fixated on getting the shareholders either a dividend or an exit. And to do so in an unholy hurry, which means that a business that might have been brilliant to begin with and a great place to work loses because they grow faster than they can hire and develop and embed good talent, because they're on this greedy triple, double cycle. I mean, so 3 times 3 is 9, times 2 is 18, times 2 is 36, times 2 is 72 times growth in 5 years. Yeah. Now, for most normal human beings, that does seem like a bit of an unholy rush, doesn't it?
You think so, yeah.
I mean, can you imagine any food business, or it's just gone insane. And there's a lot of money out there that exercises undue pressure because what they want to see is those results. Now, what that means is that you end up creating the conditions for burnout of your salespeople. Again, and mental health must be part of health and safety.
Yep.
So why is it that around 30% of salespeople are suffering from some form of mental illness? Well, again, it largely comes down to how they're managed, because the managers are trying to put the pressure on them that they are feeling from above. Yeah. And that then creates conflict. The NHS is another one. Now, look at the absenteeism and sickness because of the pressure everyone's under, the under-resourcing. Yeah. Now, we're seeing it in private business and general commerce, because 42% of people last year decided they were going to get on their bikes and see if they could move. In 2022, 72% of people in IT are expected to look for a new job.
Wow.
Now, can you imagine that for risk managers all over the place, buckle up on this one, okay? 72% of the people who maintain, manage, develop, fix your technology upon which your entire business is dependent, because you are an IT business that happens to manufacture medical devices, hemorrhoid cream, suites, sofas, does recruitment, or is a bank, but you're an IT business that does that other stuff. And 72% of the people are on the move. All that knowledge is leaving those organizations, because you can bet your bottom dollar, given that over 80% of the stuff in CRM systems is total dross and utterly unusable, single central source of record upon which the business is making all their investment decisions. Yay! Again, why are risk managers not involved in developing the CRM? Good risk management practice in order to build a CRM that's actually fit for purpose. You guys are wasted doing that stuff. Put more money in a salesperson's pocket, they'll be your best friend. Or make them, in fact, even better, get them to the top of the leaderboard. They don't really care about the money.
Yeah, that's true.
For most of them, it's about status.
Pride and status. Yeah. Interesting. So, what would your advice be then to, somebody listening in or watching on YouTube who is in a sort of health and safety manager kind of role, and they want to try to, they've got some ideas, they want to make some, they think the company should make some investments or some changes. How would you advise them to go about trying to sell that internally to the board?
That's a really good question. Okay, so first rule, people buy for their reasons, not your reasons. So no matter how logical and brilliant and insightful and on the money you happen to be, no one gives a damn. They don't care about you, your degree, your expertise, because what you're dealing with is irrational beings.
Yeah.
And most of them occupy something called the drama triangle. And they take one of three positions. The victim, why me? It's so unfair. Favorite refrain, save me. Yeah. So those people attract persecutors. You piece of, you always, you never. Okay. And they attack you at an identity, a who you are level. And then rescuers. And these are the most divisive of all. These are the kind of managers who micromanage. They double check the work and then do it again. And they interfere without help, without permission or boundaries. Yeah. And so they disempower people and they just get peeved and leave. Now, as a health and safety or a risk manager, you need to work out what is the value exchange. Can't be about price, because that makes you a commodity. Okay. So what social validation do they get by being behind a great health and safety project, or by managing risk in this way? How does it validate their perception of themselves? Now, your question that always has to be going through your mind, and I hate to do this to you, but people are fickle and vain. How do I help this person get promoted?
Mm.
Start with that. If you start with that, then your orientation is towards their benefit.
Yeah.
Okay. Which means that you're thinking as them, not about them and about what you can get out of them, but think as them. So that's your starting point. What's the outcome that they want, and how can you find what you have in common? Again, most people look for differences. You need to become an absolute master of finding what you have in common.
Mm.
And then build the bridges to make that, more of a landmass instead of just, lots of pontoons over reed beds.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it means that sometimes you have to take your time and think laterally, because let's face it, how high on the monthly or quarterly budgeting cycle does a risk or a health and safety project normally get?
Not too high,
right?
Unless there's been some kind of catastrophic.
So it's normally remedial.
Yeah.
Now it's like insurance; we all resent it until we need it.
Mm.
Yeah, but how many of us will spend the time to actually read the terms? Almost none of us will just shop around on price because we don't value it. Yeah. Now we need to create that correlation so that they see what's in it for them. So there needs to be the value exchange around social proof, education, maybe getting a bit smarter. Yeah. How can what you do help them reduce this amount of scarce time that they lose?
Mm-hmm.
How can you recover time?
Yeah.
How can you make them the hero in their own story? The key is to be ready to give up the credit.
Yeah.
You got to learn how to listen and really listen, surgical listening. That means getting beneath what they say to the real motive, the real cause of their concern, their real intent, and never painting yourself into a box. Yeah. Because very often, and you have to habituate this. This is something you have to practice, which is learning how to stop when someone asks you a question and then respond with a question, having thought about what's the motive, cause, and intent.
Mm.
Yeah. So years ago, I was selling to the CEO, and it was going really well. I turned up for the second meeting, was doing the presentation, and it looked like it was going to go ahead. And he said, so tell me, do you guys do psychometric tests? I said, yeah, we do. Oh, well, all right. Okay. In that case, we can't do business. Sorry. What do you mean? Well, I did a psychometric test for a job in the past. It said that I wasn't very good. I got another job, almost identical, knocked the ball out of the park. It's total crap. So anyone who believes in that, I'd never do business with. Now, if, on the other hand, I'd said, interesting question, Pat, why do you ask? And then he'd have told me his story, and I could have said, jokingly, better not tell you that then. And we could have moved past it because he didn't need that, because that wasn't really the issue. Because what he wanted to do was prove a point. Yeah. Now, sometimes it's also important to know when to lose well. Because what you're dealing with, there's a branch of psychology I would recommend all of you investigate. It's called transactional analysis, TA. Of all the forms of psychology out there, this is the one that has consistently, for the last 20 years, been predictably reliable. Okay. And that drama triangle that I talked about, victim, persecutor, rescuer, comes from that school of thought. Well, my favorite philosopher, Bruce Lee, was asked, what's the best way to avoid a punch? And he said, be somewhere else. And the somewhere else is the winner's triangle. So instead of being stuck in drama, and ego thrives on drama, It's all about attachment and being stuck in the past or worrying about stuff that hasn't happened yet. Yeah. The winner's triangle is about being fully authentic, fully present in the moment. Nothing else exists apart from that other person. And instead of being a victim, you're vulnerable. Instead of being persecuting, you're assertive. And instead of being a rescuer, you're nurturing and empathic. So 2 very quick examples. I'm running late for a meeting. This is the drama triangle version. Christian, I'm running late. It's not my fault. Sat nav took me all the way around the houses. Now that I'm caught in traffic, caught in roadworks. Not my fault. Okay. Am I endearing myself to you with that one?
No.
Right. Okay. Second version. Christian, I am so sorry. It's entirely my fault. I hope you can forgive me. I left a fraction late and I've got caught in traffic. It's totally me. I wouldn't blame you if you told me to turn around and never darken your threshold. Would you like me to do that?
No.
Right. It's not impossible for someone to do that.
Yeah.
Because you've fessed up. It's absolutely authentic. And you're asking for forgiveness, which is in their gift. Yeah. So again, learning how human beings work is the best investment anyone can make. Because what you learn in TA is that scripting, values, beliefs go back 75 years before you were born. Your parents and grandparents are sat on your shoulders, both sides, by the way, even the crazy ones. Yeah. And then on the other side of the table, every other person there has their parents and their grandparents whispering in their ear. Okay. It's hard, this stuff, which is why you never assume. Your job is to have them tell you. It's the vampire principle. Invite them to ask you to help. Have them invite you in to meet them. Now, this way, there's no pressure. No one sees you as a threat. And this, again, is where part of the problem lies, because if you're in sales or you're in risk management or you're in health and safety or you're in HR and it's on a Friday, okay, you probably don't want them turning up because that fires off the panic button.
Yeah.
Yeah. So how do we turn risk into your ally? People misunderstand risk. So I define sacrificing as going from higher to lower value, and there is no upside. But that's what most people define as risk. Risking is going from lower value to higher value with the possibility of losing some or all of what you've got. Now, that's an attractive proposition.
Yeah.
But it needs to be tied to the purpose. It needs to be tied to the vision, and risk management and health and safety and HR and all of those things need to be aligned towards that purpose. Because when we're all rowing in the same direction towards the same outcome, it's dead easy to be your ally.
Yeah.
I'm not competing. I want you to get there because you're after the same damn thing I am.
Yeah.
That's humanity's superpower. And we've forgotten it. Now, millennials, Gen Zs, they're actually more responsive to that by and large, still hyper competitive and very bright. But one of the things that's really giving me hope, one of my clients' 15-year-old daughter was accepted into a group, 14 to 17-year-olds that are working through Slack and Discord to produce a video game. And they're using modern project management tools, and they're using collaboration boards, and they're using Gantt charts and RACI to create these teams. They've got weekly reporting, they've got milestones, there's project plans, and this was all done spontaneously without a single adult intervening.
Wow. Now
that is the future, because those will be forming ecosystems, and this is where, again, health and safety, risk, sales, finance, legal should all be forming ecosystems so that you have more eyes on the really gnarly problems. Think about this. If all of you were focused on the 3 to 5 big strategic sprints that the company needed to accomplish in order to achieve the shareholder value you've been promising, that the board is worrying about missing. What if everyone was working towards that? That's so much smarter.
Yeah. And you'd get there so much faster, and not get caught up in all the rubbish day-to-day stuff.
And there is a simple catalyst, which is managers who coach. Because managers who coach are significantly, consistently higher performers. I interviewed a lady, Nadia Comaneci, her name is, named after the gymnast. And without fail, every one of her people hits quota every month. She's nurturing, she's looking after them, she's coaching them, but she's hard as nails. She doesn't teach them by spoon feeding them. Okay, this is the situation, work it out. Okay, test it. Right, come back with your questions. And working it like that. Now, that's fantastic. I cannot wait to see where she goes. And I know a lot of people like that now. And they're going to overtake my generation. I cannot wait. Can't wait to be pushed into the gutter. It's fabulous.
Well, there you go. That was fascinating, Marcus. I really enjoyed that. Is there anything that I haven't asked you about that you wanted to add in?
You know what? I'm going to ask, actually. I would love to speak to people from risk and health and safety, because what I'm seeing more and more is I can draw parallels from those areas and apply them into sales, but I can also give you parallels that can give you shortcuts. And learning how to sell this stuff, it's important, meaningful work. And frankly, the fact that it is sidelined, marginalized, and treated like something you just have to do, a check in the box exercise, is obscene.
Yeah.
If this is a really interesting observation. Would we need trade unions if managers were managing the way they should be?
Interesting question.
The only factor that would affect that I would think would be leadership. What pressure are leaders putting on there? But remember, fourth function of management is protection from above.
Yeah.
So you need to be a blocker. And to do that, you need to be a great coach, because that way you can coach up. Because God knows they need it. So anyone out there who wants to talk to me and maybe collaborate and get our heads together about how we can do this, all of this stuff better, because all of this is about management, creating a better world for people to work in. Because for me, becoming a destination employer, that's a key objective. I want people queuing up to come and work on our teams. And the best people coming and having an absolutely fabulous time doing their best work. And it isn't a nirvana. It can be accomplished, because I know companies that are doing it.
Yeah. And I suspect they're working through, the Maslow hierarchy of needs, and obviously safety is one of the building blocks for that, isn't it? So
absolutely. Well, again, something I've just been introduced to, which is built upon Maslow, is spiral dynamics. Check it out. Really, really interesting, because it goes to explain why you have generational conflict and why different value systems clash, but how an over strengthening of one type then creates the seeds for their own demise and the next generation to take over. So you get all of this conflict going on, but it starts to really explain some fascinating dynamics within organizations. But to my mind, what it also means is to communicate an important message, whether it's marketing or a new health and safety initiative or a change management program, to be able to choreograph that by feeding into the right values and behavior triggers. Now that's really exciting. Then you can create positive change without pressure. Everything I'm trying to do is about looking upstream to apply the least amount of pressure and the flywheel effect downstream.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to have to fix it later, because that's hard work.
That is hard work. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Good stuff. Well, what's the best way then for people to get hold of you, connect, and also anything you'd like to plug or sort of market or anything like that?
LinkedIn is the best place. There are only 2 Marcus Cauchis on LinkedIn out of the 760 million. He's a very nice recruiter in Essex. I'm not him. And he's got way more hair and he's younger, so I'm jealous. Then Twitter, I rant on there occasionally, _inquisitor. Marcus@laughs-last.com is my email. But get in touch if you reckon that I can help. I'm very happy, even if it's outside of sales or channel or whatever. Let's see what we can do. It'd be fun collaborating with people from a very different kind of mindset as well, I think.
Yeah.
Because I'm chaotic. You'll hate me, but it'd be great fun for one of us.
Perfect. Well, thanks very much, Marcus. Really appreciated it. And thanks everybody for joining us, and we'll see you again next week with another interview.
Thanks for joining us on the Safety and Risk Success podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please hit follow and do share on social media. Does anyone you know spring to mind as a great guest, even yourself? If so, please contact us on podcast@slipsafety.co.uk. See you next week for another episode.